Hi everyone and welcome. So we're going to get right into it with our first strategy in prep for our first group call. Now, if you've got the book, all right, we're not going to take a look at these show up 6 strategies in order. In fact, we're going to jump right to the O. Now, if you have your book, you can certainly take a look at this here, but you don't need it, because we're going to start on page 123, and I'm going to tell you everything there is you need to know about what's in the book. You do want to make it a point, though, that before our group call next week, you've at least read or reread this section just to familiarize yourself again with all of that. Okay. One of the things I did when I wrote the book was that I wanted to find a particular quote that meant a lot to me that would help me set the tone for that particular section. And the quote I chose here for Own Where You Are comes from Steve Jobs. And what he says is that your time is limited. Don't waste it living someone else's life. For us to truly own where we are, we have to embrace everything about ourselves. The good, the quote-unquote the bad, and a little bit of the ugly too, right? But owning where you are is never about beating yourself up. We want to come into this strategy with the space and the grace to just evaluate what's working, what's not, what do we want to work on, and what do we need to learn as part of our own growth and development. Now, on pages 123 and 124, there's a short little exercise in the book that I like to call Look in the Mirror. And you can go ahead and just write down a few words or phrases to assess that particular area of your career or your life. But in the resource or the handout that I sent you in the email, I expanded on this, and this is really where I want you to focus. So for this Look in the Mirror exercise, you will notice that there are 12 questions or prompts for you to consider answering as part of this show up strategy. Now, I'm not asking you to do all 12. If you want to, go for it. You don't have to do all 5 even that are listed there in the spaces on page 2. Now, I did send you a Word document, so if you want to just type in the Word document, you can. If you want to write out these questions and answer them in your favorite journal or whatever, you can certainly do that too. But the idea here, and I can't emphasize this enough, you need to journal about these. Simply thinking about them or talking about them in your head is not going to capture exactly what's going on in your mind and your thought process at this point. We want to do this without judgment. I know that's hard. I've done this work and I continue to do this work myself. It can be very hard to do this exercise without judgment when that inner critic that we all have, I like to refer to mine as a gremlin or a saboteur, is sitting there on our shoulders like, meh, 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 meh. Okay? We want to try to quiet that as much as possible. We want to acknowledge that that inner critic is really there to protect us in some ways, but it can also hold us back from really reaching our fullest potential. So let me dig into this a little bit, because the exercises that are in here I've done. I've done myself as part of my own work around what it is meant to show up. And I want to give you a recent example where this came up for me. So in all of our careers, there are other people who do what we do. And as we own where we are and assess where we kind of land, there will always be people who we believe are doing better than us and are on some measures, and those who aren't. In the coach community, it can be really empowering and very uplifting. But at times, like in any profession, it can also be a little draining, or in some cases even a little toxic. I will tell you, there are some coaches I just don't associate with, or I don't network with, because we don't gel or we don't fit. It's not because they're bad people or anything. We just don't connect. I'm sure you've seen people like that in your work as well. I had recently been introduced to a coach colleague of mine, and she and I had connected and had several conversations. And every time I looked at her Instagram feed, I was like, oh my gosh, she's amazing. Look at all the stuff that she's doing. And I started beating myself up for it. And I was like, well, you know, she's better than me. Or I would see a photo of her on a Zoom call with like 25 people, and I would be like, that's great, good for her, but what's wrong with me? And I had to take a step back and ask myself those same questions that I'm asking you to do right now. What was working? I had a lot of stuff that was working. And I went through all of those things that were going on for me in my business. What wasn't working? Took a look at that as well. What did I need to learn? And how did I want to grow? I went through and I answered all of those questions for myself, because what I was seeing in this coach colleague of mine was that was her business. That wasn't mine. My business was on a very different path with a different clientele that for me to compare was only draining me energetically and not serving me in any way, shape, or form. It was the quintessential example of imposter syndrome. I want this week and next week, and if you choose to talk about this in your one-on-one call, I want this to be an exercise for you in celebrating exactly where you are. Because where you are right now is exactly where you are supposed to be. If you're in a state of career transition, there is something you are meant to learn by that. If you're dealing with a difficult boss or a difficult employee, there is something you are meant to learn about that. If you are furloughed or looking for work, or you are ready to jump into a career transition arc where you're going to actively start looking for another job, you are exactly where you're supposed to be. This is about ownership. This is not about beating yourself up. Right? So in the handout that I emailed you, you've got the look in the mirror exercise and you've got the prompts, but there's 2 other pages in the back I want you to take a look at. They're wheel exercises. The first one is about your career. The second is about your life. Now the goal here is to rate each wedge in the wheel on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 to 10, where 10 is you're most satisfied or happy with that particular area. Now, as you go through the exercise, I want you to be as specific as you can about what the rating is. Like if you're rating yourself a 10 in that area, I want you to be really clear about what you're feeling, what's coming up for you, what's the evidence you have that a 10 is exactly it. This is not about comparing yourself to other people. This is about taking a hard look at where you are at. All right? Now, what we want to avoid in this kind of exercise is that you rate everything the same. Like they're all 7s or they're all 5s or they're all 9s. Obviously, there are things we can certainly work on, or that there are things we perhaps are not as happy with about others. So I've had some people do this where they'll go like 8.5, 7.5. They like the halves. Some like quarters. Some like 10s. You don't have to get as specific as that if you don't want to. But I do want you to start seeing where things are similar in terms of your satisfaction and where things are dramatically different. And all that is just a chance for you to have a self-assessment. That's all. We're going to talk over the course of this challenge about what kind of opportunities are coming and how you want to take some next steps toward that. But for now, this is just about looking in the mirror and celebrating where you're at. just own where you are, right? So thinking about that, also keep in mind about what emotions are coming up for you around those particular areas as well. All right? So you've got that. Okay. When we get to the group call, we're going to talk more about this. We're going to talk more about it in terms of what insights you got, what you learned, where maybe you struggled with it. And leading up to that group call, certainly put some things in the private Facebook group. I'll be posting in there as well. I want you to post in there as well too, or comment on things. As I mentioned to you in the welcome video, make it a point to set your notifications so that when one of us does post in there, you are notified about it. You can just go back and touch base and check in on that. That'd be super helpful, okay? All right, so one other thing about owning where you are. Owning where you are also allows you to step out of your comfort zone a little bit. It can be really big or really small. And so one of the things that I set for myself for this Show Up Challenge was that I was going to try not to be as quote unquote perfect when it came to doing these videos. That they didn't have to be Hollywood quality because this was just our chance to connect. But I wanted them to be real and authentic, and I also didn't want to do every single video stuck behind my desk. So I'm still in my office, I'm just in a different part of it, but I'm shooting this on my iPad. And if you've noticed my eyes go a little bit all over the place, it's because the first video I did it in portrait mode, and I had all the black bars over there, and I thought, well, that's not something I wanted you to watch for 15 minutes with those little black bars. We need to do a little better than that. So I did have a moment, I had to pull myself back a little bit, so I've got the iPad set up and we're landscaping it, and I'm really trying to do a good job looking at the camera right there, but every now and then I'm like looking over here. So if that's been a little distracting, I apologize, but this is part of where I'm stretching with you as well, just trying to get out of my comfort zone in all of this. So make it a great rest of the day. Take some time to do these exercises. I'll see you in the private Facebook group, and I will see you on our group coaching call. So you've got the meeting invite for that, and good luck this week with taking an assessment of where you are and just owning it and celebrating it without judgment. Talk to you later.